Hello, YouTubers. This is Dan, the Philosophy Man, and the subject that I'm going to discuss is spirituality. Um, I, I actually think that there are two variations of spirituality in its own expression. One variation is that I agree to be very harmful, and I'll get into that in a moment or so. And the other I think is very beneficial. So I think that this is what I'll discuss. Just to kind of preface everything that I'm going to discuss, I'm purposefully choosing a very narrowed thesis of spirituality. Um, and the truth is that when you look at what's narrowed, it's quite general in the sense that the topic really has a large amount of application. Um, so I think that this is a good starting point on it. So without further ado, um, I think I'll discuss karma, or this focus on karma. I think that this kind of spirituality is very harmful and very negative, and there are several reasons for it, um, which I'm about to explain. Um, to start with, I think what happens in the topic of karma as a form of spirituality is that there's a lot of built-in misunderstandings of the nature of karma. That is, the origins of the idea of karma is much more different than the present application and use of it. So this would be a very fitting critique, but um, I think that it misses its point if you're looking at it from that point of view. Um, I think karma, in its proper understanding, is that the universe is trying to balance itself. Now, those who think they're subject of karma either are really deeply concerned with the positive effects or the negative effects of karma as this force. And I think this is where the misunderstanding is particularly aimed at. And why is that? Well, doing good things don't have the kind of whiplash effect of making more good karma. And in fact, I think it works in the opposite way. And that is, karmic forces, if there is karmic forces, actually strive for a neutral, balanced state rather than a positive state, because a positive state would be another variation that is imbalanced. So I think that those who really spend their time trying to understand the Upanishads and understand the Hindu thought that is deeply concerned with this idea of karma would naturally come to this kind of conclusion that under some kind of inquiry you discover that karma really isn't about building good karma, it's about trying to keep the universe in balance. So I think that this form is very harmful for the subject who wants to look at karma as a form or a base of spirituality. Which gets me down to the second major harm that happens in karmic forms of spirituality, and that is most decisions will be made based on emotional anxiety. That is, the subject who believes in karmic spirituality is making anxious choices. Now, the anxious choice could be that they want to do the right thing or the good thing, particularly because if they don't, there's going to be negative effects. And that is, they want to avoid the bad things because they're going to be negative effects. And I think if you base a kind of spiritual model on this assumption of karma as a form of spirituality, necessarily you're not very cognizant that particularly that the motivations are really anxious motivations, and they're incredibly harmful. And I think that this two-pronged critique of karma as spirituality is really what's harmful for those who do pursue spiritual guidance. Of course, I don't want to leave my viewer, empty-handed. That is, it's one thing to deconstruct some idea. It's another thing to put a model that in its place. And I think in this way, looking at spirituality as a form of passion is a more beneficial and positive sense of spirituality that even a skeptic or even someone who's secular would actually find to be very enriching. And that is finding passion in life, finding passion in living, finding passion in one's environment, in one's relationships, either their family or loved ones. This form of spirituality, I think, is very positive and, in fact, can actually promote something that is very beneficial not only for the subject who pursues that kind of spirituality, but also the environment that subject is embedded in, and also the relationships that subject has. So I think in this way, the simple way of doing this is to say, well, let's contrast spirituality as passion contrasted with spirituality as karmic duties and responsibilities. And I think in this sense, if the subject of that believes in spirituality in a certain sense pursues it in this way, they constantly try to avoid pitfalls, particularly, or problems, and they're not willing to experiment, and in a way, the lifestyle that they naturally choose will be one that necessarily promotes a kind of civil obedience. It also promotes a kind of lifestyle that wants to not rough any edges, wants to conform to their social settings. This kind of spirituality, though it's widely practiced by those who are not religious or have turned into some kind of alternative lifestyle other than a religious life or a secular life, this type actually aim at a kind of social cohesion, social obedience, and a particular form of conformity. Because what happens here is that and again, all you have to do is look at the motivation of the subject. They are anxious about the consequences of particular behaviors that might result in their ostracization. You can look at crime as one thing. You can also look at their social relationships that they try to treat people really well. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not trying to argue that there's something wrong with treating people well and treating people with respect. What I'm trying to point out is that necessarily this kind of lifestyle promotes a certain type of individual, one that is conformed to society, one that really doesn't exercise their passions and really keeps themselves very tight from any kind of real exploration of the meaning of life. To conclude this video, I think I will quote Nietzsche's Human All Too Human Selection 129. Nietzsche says, "There is not enough love and kindness in the world to permit us to give any of it away to imaginary things." And I think that once you look at the subject of spirituality, and particularly the form that I was discussing that I think is harmful, you would discover that it's some imaginary thing that we invest a lot of our attention to.